is the chair of the Theater and Fine Arts Department here at Villanova, and kind of our artist in residence, at least our iconographer in residence, and he's going to speak with us today about iconography, particularly in the context of his course in the making of icons. And it's an interactive presentation here. We're going to want you to answer questions as well as ask questions. And the last group did a really great job asking questions, so there's pressure on you.
Really?
Perform here a little bit, yes, yeah. And we will be seeing the process as we go along the right chair. So. Father Richard,
well, welcome. If I were to send you to, let's say, the bookstore to Borders bookstore or any bookstore and ask you to go to the cashier and say, where is your icon department? Where can I find a book on icons? Where do you think he or she might send you?
Online store.
Huh?
The online store.
An online store? That's possible. Okay, if you were...
My Borders is pretty small.
Sectional religion, that's a good answer. Yeah. But maybe the online store might be better, you know? What do you do when you... do you know you look at icons all day long? Where are they? Think.
You look at stained glass.
Stained glass, but something a little bit more that everybody has. That you
trademark.
A trademark could be a trademark, right? That's an icon. It's not the thing.
Are you thinking of like icons on the computer?
Yes. On your homepage, you have how many? You might have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And when you hit that and you open it, where does it bring you?
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. And where is that somewhere else? Where could it be?
Anywhere.
Anywhere, right. So if you have an icon on your homepage that says My Favorite Pictures, it brings you to a folder, and in that folder there's pictures, right? And those pictures are of family, friends, activities, right? So that's, when you talk about icon, the creators of the computer took the word icon, which means image, and made it into something totally different than what we considered as a traditional icon. All right? The course I teach here is called The Painting of Icons, and it's a course that's been taught for 13 years. And it kind of started as one semester only in the spring, and then there was a large interest, so we made it the fall and spring. It's a Diversity 3 class. It fulfills the fine arts requirement. But what we basically do in the course is it's a two-pronged course. It's the actual writing of an icon, and it's the actual studying of the political, the social, and the economical influence of the icon from the beginning of imagery all the way through to the present time. And so what you have here is a kind of a representation of some of these different steps that we do in the class. One of the first things that we do in the class, and I should really say I do in the class because I'm the one that usually makes the solution up, we use something called egg tempera. And of course, egg tempera is made with an egg. So we take the yolk, and we take everything off the yolk, except just the sack. And as we roll the sack on the paper, everything except the sack starts to stick to the paper. And so all of a sudden, we have just the yolk. And the sack and everything else we discard. Now, what is an egg yolk, what is the chemical makeup of an egg yolk? Why don't you want to eat egg yolks? Cholesterol and fat. Basically, it's fat. And if you have fat, everything sticks to it. That's why it stays, unfortunately, in our bodies. Now, what is vinegar? What's the chemical makeup of vinegar?
It's acidic.
It's acidic. And what does acid do to fat?
Eats it.
It breaks it down and it eats it. So in order to use the egg, we had to put in, now this is the third yolk in here, and so now there's 3 teaspoons of vinegar. And we're going to break that other yolk that we just put in there up. And what is distilled water? How do you make distilled water? Why do we make distilled water?
So it's pure water.
So it's pure water, and how do we make it? You boil it, right? And then the steam rises, goes through the tube, and drops down into a container, and the water is distilled, and all the impurities are left in the first container, and the pure water is in the second container. And the reason why we use distilled water is because within 25, 50, 60, 100, 200 years, we don't want the chemicals that are in the water to rise up onto the icon and be trapped between the oil that seals it and the image itself, because then it would create a white film, and we don't want that. So we put distilled water in it, and we mix it. And this is the solution that we will use to bind, because egg yolk is one of the strongest glues in nature. Now, we have pigments. And let's see.
Why wouldn't you use a chemical instead of the
Because everything's natural. Did you put your hands out, palms up? They're the same amount in volume, okay? Pass them along. All the pigments we use are natural pigments, or from minerals, and from fruits, from vegetables, from whatever. Here's a piece of lapis. This is from Afghanistan. And so I have a metal sander, and I would sand this on there, and the dust that this will create becomes the lapis. And of course, lapis is a precious stone, and so lapis is one of the most costly of the pigments that are used in iconography. So some pigments have lead in it, as the kind of brighter of the orangey 2 reds has a lead base in it, not a lot. And the other one is alizarin crimson, which is a natural color, which unfortunately alizarin is very light, where lead red is very heavy. So it's the same amount, except they weigh two different weights. And of course, when you mix them, the lead is going to sink to the bottom, and the alizarin is going to rise to the top. So you can almost have 3 different colors. You can have your alizarin, you can have your lead red, or you can have the mixture of both in between. The boards that we use in this class are made from birch boards. These are plywood, unlike that panel and this panel, which are made from planks that are glued together, cut down to size, routed out, sanded, covered in glue that's a mixture of hide glue and hot water, like hide glue, like rabbit hide glue, you know, and animals, they boil it down and use the glue. And then a piece of linen, and the piece of linen then is dumped into the hot glue mix, put on top of the board, and then anywhere from 7 to 12 coats of gesso, which is a mixture of hide glue and kind of like a white clay, and that gives us our white surface. The boards for this class are pre-ordered because it would take us a whole semester to make these boards, to cut the wood, to sand it, to do all those things. So the boards are pre-made. It's a 22-step process. So, and the way I look at it is it's kind of like a pilgrimage. You come the first day of class, and on the 13th day you leave with your finished icon of Michael the Archangel, which is one of the steps a student is doing on the Michael icon. When the icon is ready to be, when your board is all ready, the first thing we do is we take tracing paper, and we lay that down. As you can see, this board's been used a lot of times for demos. And we trace an image. This just happens to be an image called extreme humility. It's an image of Christ. And it could be any image. But in starting icons, you always start with Michael, and then Gabriel, and then you progress up the ladder. Michael, Gabriel, maybe a saint, then a Mother of God, then a Christ, then a feast day icon. You keep going up until you do the Old Testament Trinity, and then the Transfiguration icon, which is extremely complex. And as you go up the ladder of iconography, the images get more complex and the design gets more complex. With Michael, Michael is one of those spirits that are the go-between between God and humanity. Michael, he who is like God, the name means. And so Michael is the Michael who fights evil, who weighs the souls of the just. And so here we have Michael as a Byzantine kind of courtier. He's dressed in a Byzantine outfit, and when all finished, he will look something. Let's see, where is it? Michael here somewhere. I've just organized everything, so it was much better when the other two classes and I wasn't organized. Let me take one of these guys out of here. So each stage of the icon is pre-done for the students. So Michael will look something like that when he's finished. All right. Michael has, as all icons, 3 highlights and 3 floats. But before we even get to painting the icon, or what we consider not so much painting as writing the icon, because in the Eastern Church, icons are the visual Word of God, where in the Western Church, Scripture is the written Word of God. So when an Eastern Orthodox person looks at an icon, he or she not only sees the image in which it portrays, but sees the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ in each icon. We're able to do icons because of the fact of the Annunciation, of the moment of the Incarnation, where Gabriel says to Mary, you're going to be the Mother of God. And because of that, we're allowed to do icons. So the icon is drawn onto the board, and after it's drawn onto the board, it's etched into the board. The reason why it's etched into the board is because eventually we're going to cover the whole board with pigment, and we want to be able to see the image, because you don't have to have knowledge of art and take icon courses in the beginning could be a hindrance. It's better to have no talent, no concept, because what we do is we do a canonical step by step by step. So if you follow the steps and the recipes, which are all given to you, then you're able to produce your icon. So far, any questions? Yeah?
Why do you have to start with Michael first? Why can't you start with like higher figure?
Because you have to obtain knowledge.
So it's like it's symbolic for obtaining knowledge.
Yeah. If you were to do Mother of God, you have 2 faces, you have many different colors, you have a lot of, even though it's always done the same, because it's, the colors, the faces are the same, the hair is the same, it's just that as it gets up into the different imagery, it gets a little bit more complicated. So you want to try to get a basic knowledge. It's like learning, you don't start writing sentences and paragraphs. You learn ABCs first. So it's the same thing. You learn your ABCs in order to put a word together, to put a sentence together, to put a paragraph together, and then finally to write the chapter. So it's the same process. After the whole image is etched in and it's all checked, the next thing we do is we use a compass. So anywhere we could use a compass or a ruler, a mechanical device, we use the compass and the ruler because it's easy. And why make it more difficult? So we compass the halo in, and we always make sure we have that little X mark where the center of the halo is going to be, so that we're able to mark that on. Now the next thing we do is we take what is known as bowl, and bowl is a mixture of clay, hide glue, and a little bit of honey. And that's mixed into this nice creamy consistency. And the word for clay is adim, and that's where we get the word Adam from. Because this is the beginning, this is the creating, the beginning, and this is where the spirit enters the icon, because unless you have this clay down, the gold will not go into the icon. So you have to have a base for the gold to sit on. Like if you were to have a gold leaf frame and you chip it, I mean a real gold leaf frame, and you chip it, what you will see is you'll see red underneath of it. That's because that's the clay that's been placed underneath it in order for the gold to adhere to the frame. So what I'm doing now is I'm laying on the clay, one of the first steps, and the clay is placed on in a puddle push technique, so that you don't want to get any lines or you don't want to get anything that's going to distract from your halo, because you want your halo to be as smooth and as flat as possible. When you're doing an icon, it's kind of like a spiritual journey, and it shows where you are spiritually, in the sense that, you know, there's some students who give up on their halo, like, oh, it's okay, this is going to work all right. And I say, okay, if that's what you want it, fine, you know, because there's no right or there's no wrong in an icon. The icon image, the final product, is what it's meant to be. So I'm laying down this clay, and after it's all down, and dry, and that's another thing about icon painting, something called patience. You have to have patience, because you can't rush to the next step until the previous step is totally dry. In fact, at the end, when the icon is totally finished, you have to wait 3, 4, maybe even 5 weeks for it to be totally dry, because it might be dry and look dry to the touch, but the board is still absorbing the water, because this clay just sucks everything in. All right? It sucks it all in, and the board becomes, in fact, if you weigh the board before you paint and you weigh the board after, not so much the weight of the paint that's going to make it heavy, but it's the moisture that's in the board that will make the board heavier. All right? So it's the moisture in the board. And then when that's finished, and it's all nice and dry, and on a day like today was, or a day like yesterday, I would oil it and place oil all over the board, and then come back the next day and check it out and put some more oil on it if it needs. Because sometimes the oil dries quicker in some places because it sucks in faster than the other, and then sometimes it will stay wet in one section for a while. But this all depends because of the way in which the paint was placed onto the board. So once all this is on and dry, and then it's sanded with 220 sandpaper, and then a stone, a burnishing stone, is used, and you burnish the clay, and then it gets really shiny by burnishing. I'm just going to, because I'm not going to get back to this, I just want to soften this, because I don't want a hard edge on this. This is not mine. I'm just using it as a demo. So we'll just let that soften out and dry. You really shouldn't do this, but after doing so many, I know what I can do and know what I can't do. So I'll just let this sit here on the side. Then it comes to a point that you want to put the gold on. And the gold we use is gold leaf, 23 karat gold, Italian gold leaf, and it comes in a book form. And then you put a piece of wax paper, because there is a way to use it like this, but most people take a half a lifetime to learn how to use it. So I then transfer it to a piece of wax paper. And here's the transfer to the wax paper. And then I usually cut it in little kind of segments, because what I want to happen is I want to get this kind of radiating line effect that you see on the halo. All right? So it looks like it's glowing from the center out. And that's why the little hole in the head is important, because even when I'm sanding or I'm burnishing, I'm putting my eye here and I'm putting my hand and my stone here so that it all comes out in a nice, even way. And again, this is one of the things that takes patience and time to do. So what I'm going to do now is, this has already been gold leaf, but there's some areas that need another coat. And so just like in the scripture where it says, then God breathed into Adim, into the clay matter, and made humanity out of it, I'm going to take like a yoga, if you do yoga and take a yoga breath, that's really good, because you want to hold the breath in your belly and get it very moist, because when you push the breath out, the warm breath is going to make the honey and the hide glue tacky, so that when you flip the gold over, it will stick. Obviously, some boards you can't lift and do that. It's much easier when you have a smaller board. Sometimes you stand and the gold just sticks to it. Then after the gold is all on, and I take my brush and I wipe it all off, because even though it might look like all the gold is stuck, sometimes it doesn't stick. And because sometimes students will breathe this way. And so the breath is not going this way, it's going this way. And another thing is, if you have lipstick or lip balm on or anything like that, you can't use it, at least when you're putting the gold on, because if you get grease on here, the gold won't stick. Then there comes a point where you start to, you do your edge with clay, and this edging of the clay symbolizes the Old Testament, and then the green line, all around here, symbolizes the New Testament. So you work from beginning to end. The halo has a red line around it after you like, this needs a repair here, but after you place it all on, this red line is the Alpha, because Christ said he was the Alpha and the Omega. And the Alpha is the red line, and the white line around this one is the Omega. So the Omega is the last thing you do to the icon. After you name it, you put the white line on it. So far, any questions? Yeah.
How did you get this effect on the gold leaf? Because otherwise,
The lines?
Yeah.
The triangular lines and the cross lines? With a ruler and a old ballpoint pen that has no more ink in it, and wax paper. So all the design is drawn out onto the wax paper. You lay it on top. And then I use a ruler, obviously, and I draw the lines. Or I put points, and then I lay the wax. You never want to touch the gold with an instrument except a burnisher, because it'll rip it off. So that's why you use a ballpoint pen. Usually an old Bic pen is the best. I have one here somewhere. And you can actually press, because the wax paper, because of the wax, will press into that minuscule thickness of gold and make an indentation to make those lines. This is a very complicated icon. It's called Blessed Silence, and it's an icon of Christ as an angel, because only an icon of Christ can have a cross in the halo, and so you see there's the cross in the halo, and there's also an 8-pointed star for the completion of the 8 days of creation. So it gets very complicated, these types of icons. In fact, traditionally that's a heretical icon, but I like the image a lot, and so I paint it. I make a lot of them. I like doing them. This icon is at a stage where I open the face and the hands. The face and the hands are usually solid. It's unlike watercolor where you work light to dark. In iconography, you work dark to light. You build up. And you have, that's like the build-up of the first highlight on the face of Michael there. So this is at a stage where the icon is not yet opened. That's a totally opened and lined icon. So I'm going to do a little opening of a small section of this so that I have to go back to the original drawing. Okay, I'll do her inner garment, which is this little bit and this little bit. And so what I do is I'll take my pigment, and the pigment I'm going to use for this is probably going to be, let's do it a red. So I'm going to make it a dark red, so I'm going to take Hematite Arizona and Burnt Umber. Now Hematite Arizona comes from Arizona. Good. I knew we'd get it. I knew this class would be awake, or somewhat. So I take a little bit of the Hematite Arizona, and I want to make the red darker and richer. So I'm going to put a little bit of Burnt Umber in it, which is kind of like a sienna that's been burnt. Sienna color that's been burnt. And I want to just punch it up a little bit, so I'm going to put it just a little bit of indigo blue in it. You see, and that's how you get colors, these wonderful layers of color like that, by putting, usually it's complement. So, you know, can anybody tell me the 3 primary colors?
Red, yellow,
Red.
And what are their complements?
Green,
Orange, and
purple.
Purple, right, violet purple. Now in the color scheme for iconography, it's very interesting. It almost runs like the chakras, body chakras. You know, when someone says, I feel really, well, they don't say it anymore, but they say other words. They say, I feel blue, or they say, I'm going to paint the town red. That's because they're channeling the color they have in their feeling in their body. And so iconographers have that same list of colors where you have your reds and your greens and your yellows, and then as you come, reds, yellows, greens, and then you start into your blues and then your violets, and then on the top is white, clear white light. So I'm going to lay in, unfortunately you can't see me doing this, but it's going to be modulated.
Can you stand?
Yeah.
Just don't shake the table.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Unlike the face and the hands that are kind of solid float of color, this is kind of like almost marbleization. I've never done this icon, so I'm unfamiliar with its colors.
You're doing a great job, man.
Thank you. sometimes what I do for the students is I will use color pencil and color in so that they could follow it easier.
And you had said earlier about Michael and Gabriel and the reversal of the inner robe and the outer
Right,
robe.
yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Michael, as you could see, wears an outside kind of red earth color robe and an interior green robe. Gabriel is just the opposite. He wears a blue-green outside robe and a red interior robe. His inner garment is red. Unlike the red and green the Madonna wears. The Madonna wears an outside red, which is more in the hematite, because it's more kind of a rust color, because that color symbolizes divinity. And the green, blue-green undergown is humanity. So by the fact of the incarnation, divinity covers humanity. The Christ image is totally opposite. The Christ image will have an outside green robe with an interior red robe because humanity covered divinity.
Can you give like different colors to different characters?
There's a set.
There's a set.
There's a canon of colors, yeah. Sometimes if I'm doing like, I do a lot of non-traditional Orthodox icons where I'll, like I do Michael Pro, the Jesuit Spanish martyr from the 20s. I did him in the clothing that he was shot to death in. So a sweater and a tie, which would not happen in an Orthodox icon. They would dress him in traditional martyr's clothes.
And the Mary that's there is one that you adapted a modern image to as well.
Right, that Mary is, the original symbol is Our Lady of the Sign, which you usually see her hands out with the Christ child in her womb. Just finished with the Christmas card. So the Christ child's in her womb. So what I did is I extended her hands and put the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and the field in Pennsylvania there for that. That was supposed to be done for the 5th anniversary of 9/11, but when Father Peter was the chair of theater, he came in one day, and fine arts, he came in one day and saw me working on that, and he said, "Oh, that's really nice." And then he became the president, and he said, "You know that icon you were doing, did you finish it?" I said, "No." I said, "I didn't have a chance to finish it yet." He said, "Well, I want you to design it into a stained glass window." So the window in Core Hall, the 9/11 window in Core Hall, comes from that design. So,
Where's Core Hall?
it's in the center of campus.
Right next to the bookstore to the left.
Yeah,
It's
oh, that place.
Okay, yeah.
There it is. The one that looks like a castle.
Yeah. So the chapel in there has a stained glass window that I designed, and it's the 9/11 window for all the Villanova students who died in 9/11. And then there's also, in the nursing school, there's a stained glass window that I designed, and now in the new law school chapel, there's one window in and there's 3 more coming. So, and then if you've passed the monastery chapel with all the glass walls, those stained glass windows are my design also.
Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah. Do you have
Shoot.
the puddle push technique here as well?
Puddle push.
The entire
Yeah, because a puddle push doesn't give a signature. A brushstroke gives a signature. So there's icons are not signed. We sometimes could tell an icon who painted it by the style in which it is painted. Like we know the paintings that were painted, the icons that were painted by Andrei Rublev because of his handling of transparencies. And the style of painting that I do is from his school of iconography. So he's kind of like the Renaissance painter of the school of iconography of the 15th century.
But for the most part, you shouldn't give a signature and expression to
No.
it because it's not to be interpreted.
No. Because it's a spiritual journey. It has nothing to do with the individual. It has to do with your spirituality. So it's not a...
How do you develop a brushstroke? Is it like you just your natural...
A brushstroke for a painter? Yes. No, you actually do it. I think you do it not even knowing you're doing it. Yeah, it's... I think they have, that's how they find how, like the recent Da Vinci drawing. They found his fingerprint on it.
Yeah.
You know, which they couldn't do that. Art historians, well, art history really didn't come into what we know today as art history to like the late 18th century. But like I have an icon that unfortunately I thought was dried, and I picked it up and my thumb went into it and not only picked the oil up but picked the first layer of paint up, and I really can't fix it without redoing the whole background, and I don't want to do the whole background. So I just have, it's one of my first ones I did, and which one I didn't know what I was doing.
This crowd would enjoy what you would say about cats and dogs.
Oh, yeah. I had students who I used to tell them, don't leave the icon unprotected, because the cats and dogs love to lick the gesso and the paint and the glue, because the glue has hide in it, so they're connected to it. So they lick whole corners off. They bring them in and say, could you fix this? You know. So there I am trying to fix. So I usually tried not to. And sometimes they even do it after it's oiled. They'll lick it. And then they get sick, is right. They don't die, they just get sick. So this would be the first layer, and this might get a second one on. So even though you really can't see the blue is there.
At what stage does it like transpire from like bits and pieces to an image? Like, what would you say? When
it's all filled up.
Like right then.
Oh yeah, it doesn't really. Tracy, do you want to get your Cecilia? It doesn't. Here's like. I'll show you on this one, but she's on her last stages of her Saint Cecilia. And a steady hand is also there. Thank you. Okay, she just put final floats. So you have to understand, it started as dark as this. And that's the only way you could get that, by starting it dark like this. This color that's on the scroll was on the veil. And now when it dries, she's going to put another coat of white. And she's going to keep putting very, very thin coats of white using lead white, because lead white is transparent, as opposed to titanium white, which is opaque. And she'll constantly put 3 or 4 more layers, and by doing the layers, she'll get this effect of this very kind of gossamer, foggy effect on the veil. And then she'll have to do her face needs a final float.
Like ideally, how long should you wait with the final product before you can actually handle it, and like how long should you let it sit?
On oiling could take a week to dry, after a week of it being oiled. What I like to do is I like to show you, I have prepared the final float for the hair of this. So you could see, this is the final third highlight of the hair. So see the way it looks now? Oops. See the way it looks now? It's going to be just the hair. So I already mixed it. It's called ochre brown. And you'll see the whole thing will now change. It marries everything together. When we start class, we start with a prayer, and you have the option of either saying the prayer or just being quiet. And we usually have music playing like this, and we usually have a candle lit in front of an icon. We ask that guys don't wear hats. So if you have a bad hair day, no one really cares.
Why is that?
Well, because it's a spiritual thing, you know?
Yeah.
And when icons are displayed, they're not hung.
They're not hung, they're on stands. You see like that little wrought iron stand there? In fact, while I'm doing this, I'll talk to you about those icons sitting there. The very little tiny one of the little martyred boy saint with the little white dress on, that's 8th or 9th century. And that's from a city that used to be called Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. That's a fact. We know where it's from. And at one time it was thought 7th or 8th century, but I've done some research and realized it's really 8th. Really doesn't make any difference. Another 100 years. But it somehow did not get, and I think it didn't get destroyed during the iconoclastic period, between 720 and 820, because it was so small. So it was probably either hidden somewhere, or somebody had it in their saddlebag, or it was in the rafter somewhere, or it was turned around. And so the icons that were all destroyed at that period, that kind of was saved from being destroyed. Or it could have been more in a Turkish dominant state instead of the Byzantine state, because the Turks did not care about the icons or about the ruling that the Byzantine emperor put out. They put it out because he said that people were worshiping icons and not venerating them. You only worship God, and you venerate an icon. And then an icon is like having a photograph in your wallet, or even now on your computer, of a loved one, mother, father, sister, brother, girlfriend, grandparents, maybe someone who might be deceased. It's the same thing. Because an icon doesn't forget its prototype. So you see now his hair is totally changed.
Is it going to stay dark like that?
It will dry later.
How did you obtain the small icon from Constantinople?
That came from a priest named Father Monsignor Miller, who's still alive. It was given to him by a Sister Mary Plunkett, who is a great niece of St. Oliver Plunkett. It was given to her for her 50th anniversary in religious life by Helen Siegel, who is a world-renowned Austrian woodblock printmaker. You probably have seen her work. Her work is all over the world, and it's in a lot of publications and appears all over. She's since deceased. It belonged to her after her and her husband. Her husband picked it up in Austria before World War II in an antique store. And Ted Siegel, when he came here to the United States, came to Canada, met Helen, they got married, they moved to Philadelphia, and he became the head restorator of painting at the Philadelphia Museum of Art before he died. And so it was in his collection. And I think he cleaned it a little too much, because there's a very thin coat of varnish on it, and the name is missing. But I've had it looked at, and the landscape is the landscape of outside of Istanbul. If you go out into the fields, that's the colors you see. and that's how and then they said they didn't think it was 7th century, more close to 8th or 9th century. The one above it is probably early 18th century. It's an icon that's just the face and hands are painted, and the rest is covered with a silver coating called Aureus, which is a decorative coating on the icon. Sometimes they didn't know what else to do to the icon to make them even special, so they cover them in silver, and sometimes they put precious stones on them. Yes?
Did it like change over time for like, because all the ones we have here are like waist and up, and those are like full body icons? Does that make a difference?
Well, no. There's full body ones, there's heads, there's waist, there's all kinds. Yeah. And an icon can be anything from a little piece of paper with an image on it to a mosaic or a fresco on a wall. It could be anything. The triptych is late 18th century, early 19th century. It's also Russian. So two of them are Russian. One is, I guess you would call Turkey now, but came originally from Turkey. And that one is a little bit different because that whole icon is painted on a gold background. So it was all gold leaf first, and then something was put on it, most likely an egg wash or a alcohol base liquid, in order to make the gold absorb the paint. And that's how that's painted. Yeah.
Why does that icon not have a clay border?
This is going to be photographed for making posters. So the clay border would probably have been cut off anyway. I had to, it all depends on what size the poster is going to be. So when I do my icons now, I don't use ones with borders on them anymore because they're made into like the St. Paul or what other one might be? The Augustine one there. That one they put a border on, the poster on the wall back there. They put a border on that one. Or like, see what happens with this one? There's no way that you could eliminate, I mean, you could go in and Photoshop all that out. But that's the sheen that's being caused by the, this was not made to be made into a card. When they saw it, they wanted to make it into a card. So then it became a card. Paul turned into invitations, posters, cards, banners along the drive out here.
You can buy some cards.
Yes, Augustinian Press. You can do that. Here's another one that they removed all the stuff off of the signs. So, or even though that one did have a border, that was an icon the university Father Peter gave to the head of the patriarch of the Maronite Church, and he's the patriarch of Damascus from the See of Peter. So he's a great guy. So they gave him that one. This is kind of more in a new kind of area I'm going into, using photographic images that I took and then transforming them and changing them into other images. Anything else?
Do you have any questions? Dylan?
What's the reason for the head posturing? I've seen that a lot, where they have their heads tilted that way.
It's usually in an iconostasis, which is the wall in which icons are put in Russian Orthodox churches or even in Greek churches. They face towards the center, which is there's a Christ image, and they're either looking left or right, so they tilt it either left or right. And you always want to make sure there's an ear showing, because you want them to hear your prayers.
And that iconostasis is one of the forms of display, so it's
Right.
stands and not a nail or something.
Right, because the background of an icon is it's the tree from the garden. The wood is from the tree, represents the tree of the garden of knowledge. It represents the ark, that Noah built. It represents the tree of the cross. So you never see hooks or nails or anything in it. So when these are placed in iconostasis, they're placed this way, and they have 4 pieces of wood that are nailed in the 4 corners into the frame, not into the icon. But sometimes when I have to bring my images for display purposes, they ask that they be hooked, and usually I use small little screws, depending on the weight of the icon, small little screws with a thin wire in the back. And then when I get them back home, I take them back out again and either display them in a stand or keep them in a box. Yeah.
This white here, like for the transparent effect on the nail, is that like a lead-based white?
That's lead-based white. That has to be the last thing you do. You have one shot with that. So for the first layer. Once the first layer is on and it's dry, and you usually use a little bit more egg into it because the egg has the strongest binding power. You know, they use egg yolks to fix marble statues. But when you do that, it has to be in a way that you're not going to pull up what's underneath of it, or you're not going to pull up the gold. Because if you drop a drop of water on the gold and try to take it up, the gold and the clay will come up with it, and you'll get back to the white. So it's like, usually I don't do that with anybody around. Or if I'm going to do it as a demo, nobody gets near the table. Because even a slip of the brush, too heavy, it can't be too heavy or it can't be too light. If it's too light, it won't work. If it's too heavy, it'll pull up. So you have a one-time chance on that. So, but that's like the 6th or 7th one I've done. This is like the first one where it's absolutely perfect. So it's a matter of constant doing and constant practicing. Like next week there's a workshop, and not my master, but his son, who's also a master in his own right. I still study with this guy, and it's going on since 1986. So I still study with him once or twice a year, or write to him, or he sends me stuff, or back or forth. He gives me patterns, and or I'll send him a drawing and say, "What do you think?" And he'll say, you know, he looks like an icon. He's got a beard maybe this long. And he's Russian. You know, he's from St. Petersburg, and doesn't speak English very well, and I don't speak Russian at all. So it's kind of fun, and he looks like one of the patriarchs and one of the icons. But he'll correct the drawing, and he'll write little notes on the side. You know, maybe use this color or that color, and even now I started doing something, and he said to me, "Oh, I don't think you really should do that. I don't think you really should do that." And now I just found out from a friend of mine who just was with another student of his that he's now trying something that I've been doing only because I find it easier than his first highlight. First highlights are really important. That starts to make the form, because there's no outside light, so you don't have like a raking from the left to the right or the right to the left. All the light comes from within. So where the body, where the clothing touches the body, like on the shoulder, over here, that would be the lightest, because the light emanates through the body. So it's an equal amount of light coming out. So to shadow it stronger to the left to the right is wrong. Yeah. So
I was just going to ask you, Father, is it harder to make an icon on gold, on the gold
yes.
leaf? So
that's a specific school that did that. I can't remember the town in Russia that did it. It begins with a P, not Pele. I can't remember it. I just acquired that after 3 years of paying for it, so I'm really happy to have it. Yeah, and again, you know, if you collect things, you're only the custodians of them. You know, so I usually collect them and I bring them into class.
How old is that picture?
They're not too sure. They think it's late 18th century, early 19th century. But no later than early 19.
Do you have any final questions before you go? You certainly can stay after, and ask something personal if you want, Nick.
One more question. Once you completely finish this, like that icon is still around from the 8th century.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do the colors ever fade, or is it?
It's egg tempera.
Sweet.
Egg tempers last forever.
Wow.
Did you ever? Well, I don't know. Did you ever cook and leave a yolk on the plate and let it sit for a couple hours and try to get it off?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
You have to scrape it off because an egg yolk has this quality to it that it'll stick to anything. You know, I mean, even if sometimes I'll drop just an egg yolk on the table and forget to wipe it up, I have to use one of these little knives and scrape it. And you almost have to scrape layers off until you get to the bottom of the formica again because it sticks so much.
How long do classes run?
The class runs 1 to 4 on a Thursday afternoon, and then I'm here usually at 1 to 4 on Friday for an open workshop, where some people who have taken the class before come and work on their own icons, and then I help them and assist them.
And the class meets your fine arts requirement?
It fulfills the fine arts required, diversity 3. 3. It's a lot of work. It's a lot. But, you know, huh?
What grade do you have to be in to take it?
You could be, it used to be only juniors and seniors, but they've opened it up. Any grade can take it. The other good thing about it is that you learn so many other things along the way. Because it's like, you learn a little bit of chemistry, you learn a little bit of history, you learn just the icon of Kazan, the political influence of the Kazan icon, where it was in the original Kazan, well, they think it's the original. The Kazan icon, of course, it was stolen during the Bolshevik Revolution out of the Cathedral of Kazan in Moscow, and it ended up in John Paul II's bedroom. And all of a sudden, he was using it as a pawn to be invited to Russia, because he wanted to bring it back to the Russian people, because it's a very miraculous icon. And he realized he was dying, so the year before he died, he sent it back. And of course, Alexis was a very stubborn patriarch of Moscow, and they kind of like the Pope of the Russian church, and you have a hard-headed Pole and you have a hard-headed Russian, so they didn't go anywhere, at least on that level. But on lower levels, there was a lot of give and take back and forth on it. So the Kazan icon now is back in Moscow, and is going back to the city of Kazan from where it came from originally. But it's a miraculous icon. The Russians carried it in a war ahead of the troops, and you know, there's some icons that cry and oil comes out of them and all sorts of things. So for the Russian people, it's very, very important. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry.
So when you get finished with these and you're done painting it, is there like some process you do before displaying it?
They get blessed. They usually sometimes I'm able to bring it down to St. Andrew's Russian Orthodox Cathedral, and it stays a month in the sanctuary. But a lot of times, if I'm saying Mass at Core at the 12:05 or the 5:20, I'll just bring it in and lay it on the altar and bless it after the Mass. But in the classroom, the last day of the class, everyone is finished except for oiling, and we'll lay them all out, and we'll bless them, bless the oil, and everybody will take them home, so that they'll oil them at home, and they're all blessed by them, and they'll take it.
If you have no artistic talent,
It's better.
class?
Well, it's better because there's nothing that, yeah, you start where you should start at the beginning. I mean, Tracy and Eileen could tell you that you don't need to have talent, right? You don't need to have talent. Hold up what you're doing.
Angels coming during the night.
That's, I fixed them. Where are you finished? That's Our Lady of Good Counsel, which it's original is a fresco in Genazzano, Italy. So, but she wanted to do in that style.
Well, thank you very
You're
much
welcome.
for working with us today.
Thank you for coming.
And I'll have homework, chapters 9 and 10 of Luke from Monday.
Hey.
You can have the last words.
Just remember St. Luke. The reason why I think he's the patron, he's also patron of barbers, you know. So, because barbers were surgeons in the Middle Ages. Just think of going to your barber to get your leg amputated.